must be without condition.
Well, we move from Kyiv now to Switzerland, and Chinese Vice Premier He Lipeng resumed talks with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Saturday afternoon in Geneva in a tentative first step towards diffusing a trade war that is disrupting the global economy. They had met earlier in the morning for 2 hours of discussions where Bessent and Lipeng discussed the growing tensions in which duties on goods imports between the world's two largest economies have soared far beyond 100%. Washington is seeking to reduce its trade deficit with Beijing and convince China to renounce what the United States says is a mercantilist economic model and contribute more to global consumption, a shift that would require politically sensitive domestic reforms. Earlier yesterday, US President Donald Trump said on his Truth Social handle that an 80% tariff on Chinese goods seems right, suggesting for the first time a specific alternative to the 145% levies he has imposed on Chinese imports. Well, joining us to discuss these ongoing talks and their ramifications is Andrew K.P. Leung, a China strategist, joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you for joining us on NewsX World once again. Let's take our thoughts back now to these tit-for-tat tariffs and this conversation which could be light at the end of the tunnel. How do you think these conversations will go? And do you think it will see an immediate de-escalation in the tit-for-tat tariffs that are now standing at over 100% on both nations?
Well, in any major conflict between global powers, it's the question of power dynamics. As you can see that President Trump and his team has hyped up the tariffs over the past couple of months, from maybe 50% to over 245%. Now, even if you increase the tariffs to over 50%, no trade is really possible. Any higher numbers is just a matter of arithmetic with very little real meaning in reality. And of course, the Chinese government has never given up in resisting and in balancing or counteracting these tariffs. It's not just at the moment, because the Trump tariffs were somehow anticipated by President Xi even during Trump's first term. Because even during his first term, President Xi has ordered the entire nation to prepare for unprecedented changes not seen in 100 years, pivoting towards services instead of exports and internal consumption, also pivoting the trade towards the global south, and on technology, putting a lot of emphasis on self-reliance and technological progress. And of course, it has this kind of prescience has been bearing fruit on the technology side, witnessed the deep seek phenomenon. And of course, the technology is not just DeepSeek, the successful operation of China's own built space station, several important missions accomplished. And above all, if you look at the total export, in fact, it has surged even during the past 2 months. Of course, the export to the United States has declined drastically. It's more than compensated to the export to the rest of the world, partly because the rest of the world is anticipated this tariffs dislocation is stocking up on a lot of products from China. This again highlights China's bargaining chip in being the centrality, the central to the whole world supply and value chain, in the sense that most of the products, household products, if you go to any supermarket in the United States, you'll find that a great deal of products the large majority proportion of them are made in China, even though they're not marked made in China. China's been embedded in it in terms of rare earths, materials, parts and components, and also logistics, because the world's top 7 container ports out of the top 11 are located in China. And of course, a lot of operations are outside China, but it's still controlled or dominated by China's supply chain. And that's a very, very powerful bargaining chip. And of course, that President Trump is facing a lot of headwinds internally. There have been protests by a lot of American citizens against empty shells, against rising prices, against, of course, growing inequality, and above all, more recently, states like the state of California, which is all for open trade, has launched a great deal of protests in terms of the Constitution, and they are already starting a legal battle towards independence in the legislature. Of course, this is early days yet, but it also shows that there is a lot of headwinds inside the United States against what is perceived the Trump's iconoclastic destruction of the world liberal order, apart from the loss of his moral and leadership in terms of human rights and a free so-called liberal world order, replacing it by rules of the jungle, unilateral coercion. So I think that bearing in mind all these dynamics, I, for one, had always been more optimistic that some
Yes.
sort of accommodation has got to be reached sooner rather than later, particularly in the light of President Trump's imposition of a 90-day pause, so that
Yes, Andrew, I apologise to have to cut you off. We are unfortunately out of time, but thank you very much for joining us and providing your insight. We will be across these developing conversations in Geneva and the rest of the breaking news from across the world very soon.